Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the 1100 Project. My name's Stuart White. This project, as you know from listening to previous episodes, is all about my attempt to self publish my book and get 1000 sales and 100 reviews within 12 months. So, the first three episodes, we talked a little bit about where I was coming from, why I personally made the decision, some of the advantages and disadvantages of self publishing, and some more general stuff. So, in this episode, we are going to start getting down to some of the more specifics. So, we're calling this one Getting Started or Where to Start. So, in terms of getting started or where to start, the first thing that I think is important for people to do, and this is something that I spent a long time on, is to have a real long, hard, and think about what you want. What is it that you want to get out of self publishing? Why have you chosen to go down this route? It's not a path to be taken lightly. It's one that you've got to be certain that it's what you want and be aware of what you're potentially giving up, of the potential pitfalls of doing it this way, but also what you're gaining and be conscious of those advantages and disadvantages in sort of two columns, and how that's obviously going to balance for you in terms of your writing goals long term. I'm hoping that perhaps information in this series of podcasts will help you with your decision. And I think that all of the steps that I'm going to go through and talk about in this episode are things that I thought about before I finally made the decision to do it and started to go down the path of investing lots of my time and money, effort, emotional trauma, and everything else that goes with it into the process of producing the book that I'm hoping will go on and achieve the goals that I've set myself. So that is what I hope for with this podcast, is that you'll get the information that will help you come to the answer of, is this what you want? So we're obviously, I would expect that you would spend a lot of time in this particular thing. I think I must have spent genuinely the best part of a year, considering if it was what I wanted. I went back and forth a few times. I remember saying to one of my friends, "Yeah, I'm going to do this," last year. I think it was towards the end of last year, and I sat and made a business plan, a 5, 3, 5, and 10 year plan about what I'm going to do and blah, blah. And then I backed out. I changed my mind and I decided no, actually, I wasn't going to do it. And I flirted around with doing other things and going in different directions for a while. But then, of course, I spent the time and I sat and thought about it, and I did the reading and I did the research, and eventually my mind came back round to deciding this is the way that I want to go with it. So let's imagine you have done the thinking. You've decided this is the path you want to go down, or you're about to do the thinking, and at the end of that, you decide this is the path that you're going to go down. What's next for you? Well, for me anyway, and you've got to decide this for yourself, of course. The way in which you do things is completely up to you. But for me anyway, I've decided that I want to do it, or at least that I want to have a little bit of a wander down that path. And this might be the same for you. You might want to sort of flirt with the idea of doing it. And at this stage, you've not committed anything or nothing more than a bit of thought and time into it. So that's fine. And you start to wander down the path and you want to find out a little bit more. Now, for me anyway, this is where the hard work began, because there is a lot of information out there about self publishing a book. And a lot of it's relevant, but I'd say more is irrelevant. So it's either really dated, it was done in a time that is no longer applicable to how you'd self publish a book now, or it was done for different types, categories, genres, age categories of books, and therefore, again, isn't particularly applicable to the self publishing of a children's book. So you've got to be quite selective about what you do begin to research, but research you must, and you must go into it all in. You've got to spend a lot of time doing this. It's not the kind of thing that if you're half-hearted about it, you're actually going to invest the time that's needed at this stage. I would recommend that you read every post, podcast, YouTube video, and there's lots of those out there, but obviously with that quality filter on as you do it, because again, there's other ones out there that are not very good or wouldn't be very applicable to you and your situation. I mean, for me, I probably found hundreds in the end. Didn't read hundreds, but I probably found hundreds that I could have uh, gone from. And then some of them, the ones that I did look at, were more useful than others. Some are more like sort of reflective pieces upon the personal experience. Some are more technical pieces about exactly how to do X, Y, and Z. You know, how to format, how to upload to KDP, how to um, do a pre-order campaign if you are wanting a paperback pre-order, for example, which is a slightly different process from doing an ebook, for example, in KDP. And so there's lots and lots of technical stuff to read about, but also the personal experience stuff too, which I think is as if not more important, because ultimately you're investing loads of your soul as well as your energy, time, and money into self-publishing. And so that's important that you are willing to sacrifice and give that energy into it. So the personal experience ones are good. I think they give you a good insight into, as I say, the difficulties of going down it as well, because it's easy to romanticize what the process is going to be like for you, and to get lost in bubbles of hope and daydreams and forget that actually it's like an iceberg, isn't it? The majority of the work is done underneath, it's unseen, it's work that nobody will ever know happened, so that you can produce that bit at the top of the iceberg that's above the water that everyone sees and they go, oh, that's great, you've got a finished book, it looks great, it reads well. That has come from hard work that is completely unseen. And so you've got to be willing to do that. And the personal experiences give you an insight, I think, into the mental toll, the psychological toll, the physical toll, the monetary toll that some of these paths can take as well. So I would suggest delving into those all free stuff. I would add at this stage, and seeing if it is actually going to be for you. I bought an ebook from an author called Karen Inglis. It's called How to Self Publish and Market a Children's Book. And for me, that was probably one of the best investments I made. I can't even remember how much I spent on it. It was only a couple of quid. And it was so thorough. It was very easy to navigate. It was easy to take in. This is a whole new world, remember, that we're stepping into here, with new terms and new platforms and lots of things to mentally balance and hold in your head at the same time. And I think the way that Karen formats and structures her book allows you to quite easily navigate what is a very, very tricky process. So that book is probably one of the first stops that I would suggest for you, if you read all the free stuff and you think, yep, I'm still going to go another step down this path. That's where I would suggest you go next. For me, that made a huge difference. Um, Also, read that book front to back if you can, and I'd maybe even read it a couple of times like I have now. And if if the things that she discusses still sound appealing to you and you want to continue to do that, then still have a look at more posts and more content, and start thinking, okay, what other resources are out there for you as well. And I'll talk a little bit about the resources later on, the how to section of this part of the podcast episode. But I started getting dug into the how to stuff as well, because I wanted to know how to do it before I decided that I definitely wanted to do it. And that's important, I think, as well, because again, you might decide, actually, this is what I want to do, but then when you look at the technicalities of it, you think this might actually be beyond me, and not something that I want to get involved in. So having a wee look at the how to at this stage, is there's no harm in that. However, obviously, I'll talk more in detail about what I did in the how to stuff a bit later on in this particular episode. So the next step is a huge step. You've now read Karen Inglis' book, you've read all the blog posts and podcast, listened to all the podcasts, watched all the YouTube videos that are out there and applicable to whatever it is you want to self-publish, and you've still decided that you want to do it. It's not put you off yet. You're happy to put in everything that you need to put into it. At this stage, the big step is to start making a plan. Now, again, this is where it could begin to get a little bit overwhelming, because there's a lot to include in your plan. And I'm going to go through some of those in a sort of bullet point list in a second or two. But you've got to include all of them and then start thinking about things like, for example, timelines. When are you going to do these things, in what order? And both of those things are very important. That I've found out from reading other people's posts and watching videos and listening to the podcast, the order in which you do them is hugely important in self-publishing. You have to be much more organized and know exactly when and where to do certain things. So that's something as well that you obviously have to research and find out more about as you progress through your journey. I'll obviously try and provide as much insight as I can, but I will admittedly say that there'll be people out there that will know much more than me. And so reading widely and finding a number of different experiences is definitely going to be the way forward for you. So we've got a bit of a plan together. We've decided, okay, I want to publish, say, in a year's time. Okay, which is a reasonable timeline, especially if you've already got a draft of your book ready and available. And we'll talk a little bit about this. I would say anything above 6 months is going to be work if you have your book finished. I'd say if you don't have your book finished, or you're still writing your book, or you haven't even started your book, you're going to have to give yourself way more time, because, and this is something that I've maybe not managed perfectly on this first go, I'll be honest. There is a couple of things that I wish I'd given myself more time for, and I'll talk a little bit about them in more detail later. But there, you just have to make sure you're giving yourself enough time. It might seem like 6 months or a year is a long time away and that you'll get all the stuff done, but things get in the way, don't they? Life gets in the way, and you often just don't get round to everything you'd like to. And the last thing you want, especially when you're in control of your own destiny, like you are with self publishing, the last thing you want is for things to start rolling out of your control. You create a timeline which is unrealistic for the speed at which you're capable of doing all of this stuff, especially if it's the first time that you've done it and you're still new to it. You don't want all of that rolling away from you, and you start then feeling like you're losing control, because that's what this process is essentially all about, isn't it? It's about having that element of control, and if you lose that, then it might just start making it feel a little bit less enjoyable and a little bit less desirable and a little bit less like the thing that you thought you wanted when you signed up for it. Now, I say all this with a pinch of salt, because actually you can change almost any element of your timeline at any point. So, for example, I've said January 16th for the publication date of my book. If it comes to it, and I hope it doesn't, but if it comes to it, I could move that date. I could put it back 2 weeks or a month or even 2 months. It's something I am completely in control of. The people who will be disappointed, obviously, are those who have pre-ordered the book or have been excited or are eagerly waiting for it to come out. But actually, publication dates get pushed in the traditional publishing industry all the time, especially over the last couple of years. We've seen it a huge amount with a number of authors. I know authors who have maybe not met their deadlines and so on. They've had to push a book. Sometimes, it can get pushed by up to a year. So it's not unusual for it to move. And as I say, I'm saying about the timelines, and you are effectively in control of all of it. So take what I said there with a bit of a pinch of salt, because you can change it. But if you're stubborn like me, and sometimes a little bit inflexible about things, you might set the date and then think, oh, actually, I don't want to change that date. And you create a lot of added pressure for yourself. So, yeah, be realistic about your timelines. And once I've gone through everything today in today's episode, and obviously future episodes, you get a better idea for how you might want to space things out for you. But I'd say on the first go, give yourself plenty of time to work through all of the various elements. So, next thing, business plans and finances. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky, because we have to then talk about the various ways in which we can do this particular process. So, you can obviously self publish your book for free. That is an option that is available to anyone at any point. Anything that's basically a document of some kind can be uploaded to KDP on Amazon. That's their publishing wing. And you can have an ebook out it's usually within a couple of days that they can process it and make it available for sale, and that's it. And you put in your description and your details and your keywords and your categories and stuff. And we'll talk a little bit more about the uploading process in a different episode, perhaps. But once you've done all that, it's now available, and you've done it, and you've self-published your book for free. Now, that's obviously an option that's available to anyone at any point, and you can do that if you want. I have my own thoughts and views on that. I am, for example, my own project, this project that we are all following and embarking upon, that involves me producing what I, or as close as I can get to, a traditionally published book experience. And so for me, I am going to be putting in all of the steps that a traditionally published book would get before it arrived and it was available to buy. And I've already done the cover reveal, for example. That happened on Friday, and it got a great reception. I'm already a fair bit through the edits now, and again, we're going through all the various stages: the developmental edits, the line edits, copy edits, and finally we'll get to proofs. And we're making sure that everything that happens is part of the traditional publishing experience. But because of that, the cost is at the other end of the scale from the free experience that I talked about a moment ago. And that's difficult because when we start talking about how much money it costs to self-publish your book, we start creating barriers, financial barriers to people that do not have the funds or the means to do that. And this is why I said before finances, I said business plans, because for me, and this is just my opinion on it, and I know other people share this, but not everyone will. When you decide to self-publish your book, you have to view it like a business. Now, if I wanted to start a business in 6 months' time, I would need to start looking for some capital to get started. You can, or you can, I guess, but it's more difficult to start a business with no capital at all. And that either has to come from you. You put capital into the company, and yeah, you can start the business, and then you obviously can repay yourself over time, or you get a business loan from the bank, or you might have a very wealthy relative who sees the potential in you and sees you as an entrepreneur and a business person, and they might be willing to invest in you and your company. Whatever the situation is, you need money to get started. Okay, in almost every business, and for me anyway, that's the way I view self-publishing. If you want to do it, not right's not the right word, but if you want to do it so that it's in line with what you would get from a traditional publishing experience, then I think that you have to be investing money, and not just a little bit of money, but money to the tune of thousands, rather than just hundreds or tens. And but I'll go into finances in more detail. I'm going to spend a whole episode on that in a week or two, and we'll talk more about that. But yeah, like and one of the good things actually about doing this is it has given me an awareness of how much money a traditional publisher is spending on each book that they acquire. So not only are they giving the author an advance of £10,000, £20,000, or sometimes a lot more, they are also investing thousands and thousands into the production of the book before it's even printed. And then, of course, the printing costs and everything else that comes with it. And when you have more of an awareness of that side of things, as I have gained from the process that I've been doing at the moment, you then start to understand a little bit why, for example, royalties are not like huge for authors, and why there's I guess, discounted sales and reductions in prices, just to try and recoup some of that money that's gone into the investment of the book, because it's not just what you've given to the author, it's also what you spent on editing and cover design and illustrations and everything else that goes with that as well. So yeah, I think you need to make a business plan, and that's something, if you're not a businessy person, again, I'm not saying self-publishing isn't the right path for you, because you can do it without really being a business-minded person, but it's definitely harder if you don't sort of make plans and have a business mindset towards self-publishing your book. But as I say, I am going to do a full episode on this, so I won't speak too much more about that at the moment. You can do it for free. You can spend a lot of money on it and still do it badly, of course, as well. So there's a few different ways to look at this process and to sort of weigh up the pros and cons in terms of the finances involved as well. Next up is editing. Now, editing is obviously a hugely important aspect of self-publishing a book. Now, when you go through the traditional publishing, you will go through several stages of editing. You'll have a developmental edit, which looks at the big picture and structural stuff. You'll then have a line edit, which narrows in a little bit more. Then you'll have a copy edit, and then you'll finally have a proof stage as well. And again, I'm going to have a whole episode just talking about editing. So although I'm being brief about it today, you will get more of an insight into this, especially how it applies to self-publishing in a future episode. So don't worry if I'm being brief and skirting over a few things here. But you should be going or aiming to go through at least some of these processes, even if not all of them. As I say, I'm planning to do all four stages. Already progressed through the first one and on to the second one, and we should get through the last few over the next month or two, and plenty of time for the book being published. As I talked about earlier on in terms of timelines, I kind of wished I'd given a longer timeline maybe for the edits, but that's something that I've learned from this, and I would put into practice for the next book that I self publish. But I think that being aware that those stages are involved in traditional publishing, and therefore, if we're serious about having a book that is able to even remotely compete with those on from the bigger publishing houses on the bigger marketing budgets who are going to have in-house or sometimes freelance editors who are very thoroughly editing their work. We have to try and sort of compete, I think, as self-published authors, and that's why I will make sure that my books go through those processes. I know people who don't necessarily go through such a thorough set of edits with their books, and that's fine. There's a number of reasons for that, and it's probably money related because getting a good editor who's going to go through several stages of editing with you, and then a good proofreader who's going to proof your novel and so on, that it can be expensive, and it really does start to add up when you add up all the money together as well, which, as I said in one of the previous points, is why you've got to kind of treat this a bit like a business and make a business plan and calculate, okay, so if I spend X amount of money on editing, where am I getting that back further down the line, and so on. And it becomes, if you don't like the numbers, that can become quite tricky. But for me, anyway, the editing stage should involve all four of them. Now, if you happen to have a spouse or so a really good friend who's happy to do any of these stages for you for free or for a reduced rate, that's brilliant, and you should take advantage of that. But yeah, quite often you find that the rates that you pay are often equivalent to the quality that you get in terms of that. So sometimes you will have to pay a wee bit more. And just one thing to say on editing, just and I'll go into this in more detail on the particular episode, is that often the freelance editors which you can hire to edit your book are the same ones who will also do freelance work for big publishers. It's There are in-house editors, of course, but they often don't have enough editors in house to cover all the work, and they can get or they don't have the right person to edit that book, and they'll maybe look externally for people to come in too. And so it's worth your while looking around for editors and seeing, is there any freelance ones who also work for for big publishers, because then you can be assured that the editing experience that you're going to get is equivalent to those who have been edited via a traditional publisher. And I think that's important for us as self-published authors, is to remember that we can still get the same level of rigor and thoroughness in our work than someone else who is published with whichever publishing house it happens to be. Okay, so don't sell yourself short if you can possibly do so, if you can afford to do so. Go with a good editor, because it will show in your final work, and ultimately that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about the work, it's about the process, it's about the story. You want someone to read your story and love it, and the good editors will get the best out of your work, and no editors or poor editors will obviously not. And you might leave your reader with a more disappointed experience if you don't. Okay, and the one caveat to all of what I've just said there is that there are some people who self-publish who are editors themselves or are very good editors for as authors, who are therefore able to do a lot of this on their own without having to pay, and then that's fine. And everyone's got to do their own thing. But I personally, I'm a poor editor. I'm not good at it. I don't have very good objective distance and ability to take myself out of the story and read it coldly again. So I do need that assistance there on the editing front. The next point, number 6, was the formats to publish in. So again, you can upload a document to KDP tomorrow and have your book out in a couple of weeks. A couple of days via KDP on the ebook. But if you want to produce a paperback, which if you're writing middle grade or below is the much preferred format, I'm pretty sure it's like 95% or thereabouts of all books sold to audiences middle grade and under are in paperback, and there's only like 4% or something ridiculously low in ebook. So you're probably looking, if you're writing middle grade or younger, to go paperback. If you're writing YA, for example, it's a bit more 50-50 on the ebook stroke paperback front. So you might have a bit more wiggle there, and maybe say, well, actually, I'm going to go ebook only with my YA. But if you're writing middle grade or below, you're just not going to make any kind of dent if you just go ebook. And again, the caveat is there's always exceptions to everything that I say or anyone else says. So maybe there is a middle grade author out there that's killing it in ebooks, but my suggestion would be that the majority of the market buys paperback in the younger end of children's fiction. So do consider the formats you want to publish in, and I would suggest that you do include paperback. Hardback is also possible. It's something that you can do via Ingram Spark, but we'll talk more about that in the formatting and uploading episode that I'll do further down the line. You've got to consider cover illustration and design. That's something to consider before you even get embark upon this journey. For me, it was a fortuitous experience with my first book, in that I did a general shout out for a cover illustrator, and I found someone great. When I did that shout out, someone who, when I looked at their portfolio of work, I knew I wanted them to work on my book. It was quite, as I say, it's quite fortuitous that that happened. And we did the cover review last Friday, recording this on Tuesday, the 20th of September, and we did the cover review on Friday, the 16th, just there. And we got an amazing reception because Jen's artwork for the cover is without being too cheesy about it, it was out of this world. And we got a lot of comments to that effect. And so choosing the right cover illustrator is important, because again, when we look at self-published books, sometimes we see covers which look as though they've been done by our nephew on Microsoft Paint or something. Without being too disrespectful, they'll do look awful when someone who's not a professional does them. And again, if you are a professional and you do your own covers, and that's fine, but you just got to be, I think, it depends what impact you're going for. But if you want to have something that sits on the shelves and looks the same as every other book, you've got to invest in a very good cover illustrator. Or if you're doing YA tends to have not have illustration to cover; they tend to have cover designers, don't they? So, but again, a good cover designer is worth their weight in gold, because you want to stand out. As much as we say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, I think we all do, and I think certainly kids do, and we want to make sure that our book is one that's appealing to the eye as well as to the brain when we start reading it as well. Cover reveals and pre-orders, you've got to think about that as well and factor that into your plan that you make at the start. If you decide you're going down this route, I decided to go for a cover reveal and try and give myself 3 months or so, which I've managed to do. Pre-order campaign started for the ebook. Paperbacks obviously still to come, because I'm just finishing off some. I've still got to finish the edits, so therefore can't launch the paperback campaign just yet. Or technically you can, and this is one of the things I've read up a lot about. Technically you can, but there can be issues with it. So you're best to wait until you have the final polished manuscript before you upload for a paperback pre-order. And again, we'll talk about the logistics of that in a future episode when we get to that particular part. Marketing publicity, it's easy again just to throw your ebook or whatever up onto KDP and to say, okay, this is so good, this book is so good, it's going to sell itself. My book will sell itself. And that's obviously not true, because there are millions of books on Amazon, on KDP. There are thousands of books on bookshelf. So you're competing against a lot of competition, and your book won't just sell itself, or almost no book does. You have to think about how you're going to market your book, how you're going to get the word out there about your book, how you're going to publicize it. And there are professionals that can help you with that. In the course of my research and reading, I've heard a lot of horror stories about marketing and PR companies who charge a lot and don't deliver an awful lot for authors. So that's something you have to really carefully consider. Where's your money going? I have my own idea about where I'm going to invest in terms of marketing publicity, and it's in good people who I know will do a good job for me. I think that's almost as important as a big flashy company that you don't really know much about and could potentially not do the job that you want from them. So, but again, that's obviously all author choice. You can decide what you're going to do in terms of marketing publicity. You can put in none, and just hope that you can share your book on Twitter every so often and it'll sell, which I don't think is going to be a successful strategy for you. You can look at how other authors and self-published authors have done it in the past, and that's what I've been doing a lot of research into. There's lots of resources to help you with that as well. There's podcasts out there. If you type in self-publishing onto any podcast listing, you'll find a lot that come up, and there are some good ones out there as well. And I'll maybe talk about a couple of them at the end of the episode. Okay, so a marketing publicity plan is good. I've got a wee tab on my spreadsheet for that. So I think that you've got to consider that when you decide to self-publish. And the second to last thing that I was going to mention today was about doing it and doing it right. And I sort of alluded to that earlier on when I was talking about editing and the cover design and illustration and so on. There are obviously there are a myriad of ways to self-publish, and there's obviously a huge spectrum in terms of investment of time, energy, resources, money, and everything else that you can invest into your book. And yeah, depending on how much you invest of all these different things, you can get a variety of different outcomes. So, for example, some people spend almost no money and get great outcomes because they're able to invest loads of time and energy and skill. They must have some skill if they're not spending much money, and they're able to do all of this stuff well and not spend much and still have a good outcome. And there obviously are other people at the other end of the extreme who spend a lot of money on their book and also don't get a good outcome. And so, you balance those two things up, and you've got to think, okay, where's it wise to spend money on and time on and energy on, and where's it not so much? Now, for me, again, I'll talk about the purpose of this project that I'm doing. It is to show that a self published author can still produce something that is of shelf worthy quality in bookstores that children are going to want to read alongside some of the bigger name, traditionally published authors. That is what the hope is with this project. And at the very least, I will do the things that I need to do for that, and then let the other subjective stuff take care of itself. So I can't do anything to control whether someone's going to like the book necessarily. Of course, can make my story more engaging or better, but in terms of what I'm doing on the self-publishing side of things, there's not a lot I can do about that, but I can do all of the other steps in advance of publishing the book, which will help to improve the chances that it will do quite well, and will do as well as I hope it will do in this project. So I want to do it right. I want to have all of the stages of editing. I want to have a brilliant cover, which I've already managed to tick the box on, due to hiring the right person for that. I want to make sure that there's a proper marketing publicity campaign in advance, that we it's widely available in bookstores, and that's again another thing, another episode to chat about how you go about doing that, and that's another big job that's in the future for me. And so there are a lot of things you have to do if you're going to do it right, is what I'm saying. And you can do some of these things, you can do all of these things, or you can do none of these things, depending on what your own goals and aims and hopes and dreams are for your particular self-published book. But yeah, I put that down as note number 10 there: doing it and or doing it right. And for me, I'm doing it, but I also want to do it right, and that's important to me. Okay, last wee point is about the how to of it all. So we've discussed all of the different things you need to make a plan for: timelines, business plans and finances, editing, formats to publish in, cover illustration design, cover reveal pre-orders, marketing, publicity, and whether you're just going to do it or you're going to do it right. So there's a lot of things to consider and to plan for there. So how do you actually practically do all of these things? And I'm going to just give you a little taster of that, because I'm going to talk about all of this in more detail in the future. But there are many courses, websites, blog posts, ebooks, which can show you how to do almost every aspect of this process. It'll take you through it step by step. It'll have a YouTube video that shows you literally a screen grab of the person doing all of these things, so you can get talked through it quite easily. Some of the things, and I think this is understandable personally, you do have to pay to access. So, for example, the better resources that I've read and used for this process so far have been charged or paid for courses. I did a video course which is amazing, but I obviously had to pay money for it. I bought a ticket, a digital ticket to the self-publishing show. They do a big conference every year. Mostly focuses on genre fiction and the adult side, but there are still some tips to be taken from it for a children's writer as well. And so, and obviously, I bought the book from Karen Inglis that I mentioned earlier on as well as a great resource. So yeah, definitely worthwhile investing a bit of money into to learning more about the process, because as I say, there's so many good paid resources out there in addition to all the free ones as well. Like as I say, some of those have been really good. They've been really step by step in terms of the how to of everything, and I think that's. It makes the whole process just seem a bit more manageable, because it can be quite overwhelming when you think about all the different things that you have to do. Um, I think, for example, when you're uploading to like KDP or Ingram Spark, whatever your chosen platform is, it's easy to make mistakes there. I've read a lot of like these blog posts and YouTube videos and stuff that I've watched. I've heard of stories where people have, for example, there's a box that you tick in terms of returns from shops, and I've heard of horror stories of people been delivered hundreds of books, from that shop, and been charged for the shipping and so on. And you've got to be careful about how you do it, and all these how tos are really really valuable. And I'll obviously talk a little bit about some of those in future episodes of the podcast too, to try and help you avoid all the pitfalls involved with it and to help you out. But yeah, I think that doing your own research is always, firsthand is always better than relying on someone like me passing it on to you, because I'm not going to give you everything that's specific to you and your experience in your book. So I'm just talking about my own, and hopefully you'll gain something from it, but it's not a comprehensive, personalized pathway for you to follow as well. Okay, so that's the different points that I thought were important in terms of getting started, or where to start when you're starting to think about, should I self-publish or should I not self-publish? And as I say, it's not for everyone. You might have even listened to this episode of the podcast and thought, actually, I don't think this is for me, because that sounds like an awful lot of work, which it is. It covers a lot of bases that I don't think I have the skills or the patience or the time to learn more about. The finances worry me. Maybe that's obviously a huge thing, and it's something that I had to think long and hard about as well. As someone with two young kids at home, and a wife studying at university and so on, I had to think is a lot about the finances involved as well, and whether the the small risk, because it's I hope it's not something where I'm never going to see the money back again. But the small risk that you make in terms of investing in yourself and your work, and taking that gamble in order to see if it works for you. Okay, so I hope that that's been really useful for you, and you've got an insight, and you've maybe either decided yay or nay. And if you decided yay, that you're starting to make that plan already based upon the different things I've talked about, and you've maybe made a spreadsheet, and have all the different tabs for the various points that we went over there. That's what I have, and that's something actually I'll talk about in a future episode, as well as exactly how I go about, or I went about, making the plan for this particular project, and it might be useful to you. It might give you some hints and tips to help yourself get started on this long and arduous, but hopefully very rewarding journey into self publishing. Okay, so if it's for you, I hope that you'll keep following me on the podcast episodes as we go forward and we talk more about specifics. If it's not for you, I hope you still follow anyway, because I think learning about alternative pathways and different ways in which we can publish our books and get them out there to our readers, to the kids, is important too. And over the next few weeks, I'm actually going to have some guests on with me as well. I'm going to be speaking to them about their experiences of self-publishing. I'm going to be speaking with my illustrator, hopefully, if we can get a time arranged, and have that in a future episode. Speaking with my editor, and so on. So there's quite a lot still to come. Even if this isn't particularly the path that you want to go down, there's still going to be lots there, and lots of information that you can garner, and lots that you can learn, and a lot of insights that you wouldn't get if you didn't continue to listen. Okay, so thanks to everyone who's stuck with me. I don't know how many of you are going to listen to this particular episode, and who are going to continue to listen to the episodes that go beyond this one, but thank you all for listening to this episode, and for the previous ones as well. And I hope that you'll all come and you'll join me next time on the 1100 Project podcast. I'll see you all soon.